Good evening and welcome to JADASA Live. This is Pastor Michelle Wright. I am co-hosting, sitting in for the fabulous Cynthia Bennett, who was unable to be with us on tonight, but she is close by. I want to say good evening, and welcome to JADASA Live tonight. Well, listen, we have a very fabulous show tonight. We have so much ground to cover, and we have a very wonderful guest who's going to share her life and her story with us. Listen, if we've ever needed hope and joy, we need it right now. And so we're very excited to talk about and listen to our guest on this evening, Felanice Yancy, and she will be sharing some information with you to enlighten your world. Welcome to the show, Felanice.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I am excited.
I'm excited.
This is awesome. Well, we have listeners listening in on various ways, and we're just excited that you could be with us on today. We recognize that for those that don't know you, we're going to talk a little bit about who you are and what you've done. And we've got some really key points that we want to share and cover with the listening audience. I'm sure you can agree that in this time now, there is so much that people can gain from hearing an inspirational story such as yours, and just to give them hope in times like now. We recognize we just passed the holiday season. For some, they're really excited to open up gifts, and for others, they're just really glad it's over. So on today, we're going to share what the exciting times can be when we talk about our dreams, when we talk about life in a positive way, even though we've had some trials, because I'm sure we're going to talk about those trials that we've gone through. So would you just introduce yourself to the listening audience for those that are listening in to learn a little bit more about you, and we'll dig right on in after this.
Hi, everyone. My name is Felanice Yancy, soon to be doctor, and I am a program manager for Microsoft. I work under data science and artificial intelligence and machine learning for our Microsoft 365. And for those of you that use Word, PowerPoint, Excel, you are using my product.
Oh, wow.
So I'm super excited about that. And I am in the third year of my Ph.D. program. I should be finished hopefully next year. So I'm super excited about that. But I have a background in software engineering, and I am originally from Chicago. And so that's a little bit about me. I look forward to telling you.
Awesome. You've covered some great ground there with sharing with who you are and what you've done. And of course, we all love Microsoft, right? So we want to say thank you to them as well. But we want to just share a little bit with you. We started talking about the various trials there are in life. And we recognize that I believe that the Lord created us where the details make the story. Right? So it's okay to just have wonderful things, but we're going to be talking about today. We don't want our distractions, delays, those things to derail us from our dreams, right? We have dreams that are big. I believe dreams should be bigger than we can imagine, bigger than what we can think of, and that certainly is what you've encountered. Would you share with us about life? I understand in life we have family, we have various components. Tell us a little bit about your family. Tell us about when we look at you. Who are we really seeing? What is this woman encompassed about? Talk to us.
Oh my gosh, there's so much. So growing up, my parents had me at 15. And so my grandmother raised me. And so I grew up in the church, and I grew up, just learning about God. And so I learned early on that I had a particular gift for engineering. And so at 8 years old, I knew that I wanted to be an engineer. And so I started to seem like everything that happened in my life sort of propelled me towards engineering. And of course, I had some difficulties along the way because I was a girl. Not only was I a girl, a Black female. And so people tried to discourage me. And I grew up in the projects of Chicago. So it wasn't like every day I was seeing an engineer. I was seeing gang violence and, people, on drugs. I saw a very different world based on the world that I saw in my head for myself. And so it was very challenging for me because I didn't necessarily go to a STEM school. And so I started to seek out, various programs, and I was very young. I think God, sort of got to me very early. And so I started to exhibit signs of exceptional ability in science and math at a very early age. And so my grandmother started to sort of try and understand, what does this mean for her? She's very different than the rest of her peers. And so growing up, I went to Von Steuben High School in Chicago. And so I remember my teachers telling me, I would never be an engineer. Like, don't pursue it. Do cooking, do something else. And, and in my mind, I couldn't imagine anything else. Like I wanted to work in tech, and I didn't necessarily know what that meant for myself, because I grew up in the era where computers were sort of just starting to come around. And so I ended up going to college in Chicago, and I started out at a HBCU. And so I didn't have a lot of money. So I had to put myself through school. I worked the entire time. And so it was very challenging to try and do an engineering degree. I was an electrical and computer engineering major. And so I ended up having to drop out of school. And so I was, oh my gosh, this is so, like, how am I going to get to my dream? This is my dream. And so along the way, people would try and discourage me and just say, just go work. But in my mind, I knew that I was purposed for something different. And so I ended up moving to California. And I was like, so I worked at UCLA. And true story, I worked for a doctor, and I hated his system, the way that the people sort of, input into the system. So I designed an entire database for him. And so the doctor came into the office and was like, who did this? And I was like, me. I was bored and I didn't like your current system. And so he encouraged me to go back to school. And so I ended up going back to school in California. I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills, CSUDH, shout out. And God just sort of just moved. I said, God, if this is really you, true, like literally word for word, God, if this is you, if this is really what you want me to do, I want an internship every year. I want you to bless me with my school being paid for, and I want a job when I graduate. These were my demands for God. And people were like, you gave him an ultimatum? I did. And I wanted to know that it was really God that was really working in my life. And so he did. Every year I had an internship. I, worked for TRW at the time. I worked for GE Medical. I mean, God, he literally opened doors for me. And I was getting ready to take a job at JP Morgan Chase. And I heard God say, this is not the job for you. And it was like March. And I was graduating in May. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm getting ready to graduate. How do I turn this job down? So I turned the job down. The very next week, I got a call from my school. Northrop Grumman is here. We want you to interview with them. We think your resume is amazing. So I'm like, okay. So the next week I interviewed. I remember it so well because Johnny Cochran had just passed. And I actually, on my birthday, his funeral and everything was on my birthday. Wow. And so I walked into the interview and I'm like, it's my birthday. And they're looking at me like, we don't care. Are you ready to interview? And so I interviewed and I got the job unofficially that same day. And so it wasn't the salary that I wanted. It wasn't necessarily, especially since I turned down like an $80,000 a year job. And I'm like, God, and I'm less at Northrop Grumman. And I remember God telling me, just give me 1 year's time and I will bless you. And everything that he purposed, everything that he told me, he did. Well, in that time frame, I meet this man who is amazing and my whole world changed. And so I ended up marrying Natalie Cole's son. And so there's that dynamic, and I have a security clearance, and now I'm, working on, space shuttles and landmines, and I'm working on all this amazing stuff at work. But then there's this other life of mine that is also, very open, and me trying to stay very hidden in this lifestyle, very challenging for me. And so it was a lot of strain on my marriage. It put a lot of strain on, my relationship with my mother-in-law. And it ended up being such that, you don't realize the world that they live in. The world that you live in is very, very different. And I am this engineer, I'm this nerd. And so, nothing about my life is, glamorous. I don't like a lot of makeup. I'm in jeans and t-shirts. I am a nerd. And so people would sort of laugh at me, and they were like, oh, like, how can you be in this world? What are you doing? But I'm like literally on the front lines. I'm saving lives. Like,
yes.
Princess Diana, I worked on an amazing project that I want to share. Princess Diana put a treaty to end landmines just blowing up randomly. And so I got to work on this amazing project. I designed the munitions. And so when I talk to kids and I tell them, I'm like, a girl actually, designed this. And so Call of Duty came out years later. And of course, I had signed a non-disclosure, so I had to relinquish all rights to the product. My munitions are in the game Call of Duty. And people don't even know that a girl actually designed these munitions. And so I was super excited, it took me like 2 months to actually design these munitions. But Northrop Grumman was an amazing company. Working in aerospace in general is just amazing because you get to learn about planes and how they work and how they operate. And working for the space shuttle was by far my most rewarding project that I've ever worked on as an engineer. But the challenges that I faced along the way, being a Black female, were numerous. And people didn't necessarily want to see me in a role that was prominent. So I faced a lot of racism. I faced a lot of discrimination. I remember wanting to study computer science. And I remember the dean of the college telling me, you're going to be the only Black female in this program. No way we can let you work in computer science. Go do something else, do business. And he wouldn't sign off. Like, true story. I did not, my bachelor's degree was stunted for computer science because the dean said, I can't sign off for you to be the only Black in computer science. So I actually got my bachelor's.
Let me just ask you a question, because I want to go back to the very beginning of what you said. I want to go back to the fact that you were a little girl being raised by your grandmother who tinkled around to find this passion that you have for the field that you're in. What was it like to have you in a household? I'm sure you were the fix-it person. I'm sure you saw a way to find a way to fix things. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because it's so vital for the wonderful woman that you are to not give up. Even as a child, sometimes we will see our children do things and not fully understand it. Did your family accept and understand that you were really passionate about this field that you're in as a child, like around the house and finding ways to, like you said with the doctor? Okay, I know if you fixed a doctor's system, I can imagine you as a child. So talk to us about your childhood with your passion. And the reason I said that, you mentioned another component, which are you. Females, especially Black females in your field, the challenges, the wide range of possibilities, but because we can be told something. So as a child, talk to us. Were you that child that fixed everything or wanted to be in the house, to be noticed? And listen, that's something to be proud of when you do something like that and you're that young. So talk to us and tell us a little bit about your childhood with this field. How important was it? And was it anyone in your family that mentored you?
So I almost electrocuted myself, I don't know, at least 10 times as a kid, because I was always trying to fix something. And my grandmother would just laugh at me and go, why are you trying to fix this? It's broken. I'm like, no, it's not broken. And so just intuitively, not like necessarily reading a book about it, or I couldn't really look it up on the internet. I just sort of tried to fix it based on what I thought would work. So hence I almost electrocuted myself several times. But my grandmother was old when she, got me. So, and she hadn't 8th grade education. She couldn't.
Mm.
So luckily, I, didn't need help with homework or any of those things. I mean, I think about that sometimes. I go, I wonder what my life would have been like if I needed homework assistance. Like, she couldn't help me. And so she basically, like, told my school, hey, there's something different about her. I think she's gifted. And so my school was like, yeah, I think you're right. And so they tested me, and I was
Wow.
in fact gifted. But it was challenging because I just had like maybe a couple of teachers. Actually, one of them I still keep in touch with today. She's
That's
known me since
wonderful.
I was like 9 years old. And so she mentored me, and she sort of encouraged me to pursue my dreams, irregardless of my background. Growing up in the projects of Chicago was very rough. And so you didn't necessarily see kids, wanting to be engineers or doctors. It was sort of a different life. And so I stayed in the house a lot. I read a lot, and my life was very sheltered until we moved.
Mm.
13. So I didn't really have a normal childhood because my grandmother wanted to keep me safe. And so my love for reading was very much very avid. And so she would just give me all kinds of books to read, and I would read probably 6, 7 hours a day. That was sort
Wow.
of, my life. But it was challenging because both of my parents, didn't raise me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
really have that, that push from
Got
them.
it. Got it. And the reason I'm saying that too, because in a lot of households today, I know in school districts that we served in, we would find that over 80%, and that seems like it's astronomical, but over 80% of the people that were raising children were grandmothers, aunts, and uncles. It wasn't that the parents did not want them. There are things that happen. You said something because I want that person listening in that may feel that they weren't raised by their biological parent, that maybe their life would have been different. But you said something key. You said, my grandmother had an 8th grade education, but yet with that education, she was able to see something and really push you to understand that even though I'm feeling this, even though I don't have what you may need from the educational realm, I have enough wisdom to lead you to someone that can give you what you need. How honorable is that? To see your gift and make sure you get into the realm that you've gotten into. And what I want to say to you is your success is phenomenal. And I hear you talk about the Lord, and I've heard you say about high school and being a woman that is in this field that so many people may be rejected in or ostracized or stereotyped, but yet you made it. And even in marriage, you talked about how in your marriage, you married into this very wealthy and wonderful family. They had a whole different lifestyle. And even in that, it was a change for you. Why am I saying that? Because sometimes we are stretched beyond what we naturally can handle in order for us to become who we really are. Talk about your family life there. I know that you were in this wonderful family. Your mother-in-law was known across the world. You were married to her son. And yet you said you were really still struggling, not really struggling, but you had two sides. You had this wife and the compassionate side of you of wanting to be what he needed. And then you had your career. Can you speak to the woman that's out there thinking, man, I know that I have this passion, but would you speak to that person that will not give up in the midst of all that is going on?
Well, so what I would say to anyone is that don't give up your dreams for a man. While I loved Robert and he was, probably the first man that I truly, really loved, there was this passion in me that needed to be nurtured. And so I made sure that I attended conferences. I made sure that I read about my field and that I stayed in close connection with people who were smarter than myself to keep me grounded in the sense that engineering was always something that I truly loved. But there was his life as a musician. And I turned down a job there, at Panasonic. And I had the opportunity to live in Tokyo, Japan. And so I turned the opportunity down for Robert so that he could stay in the US with his mom. And so I think about that time now and I go, what would my life have been? Because I mean, like, Japan wanted me really bad. They wanted my expertise and they were willing to pay top dollar to get it. And I literally gave all of that up for him, but I wasn't willing to give up engineering itself altogether. There's times I was, asked to, just be a stay-at-home wife. You don't have to do anything. And inside of me, I had to nurture myself and say, hey, this is what you've worked for your entire life. You can't give that up. And I struggled, to try and get to college. I struggled to try to get funding. I struggled to try to get through college, to graduate. I want to help other people to know that this too is possible for them. So just because I struggled so much, I didn't want anyone else to struggle. So I wanted to be that face, that voice for them, to encourage them, because I didn't want them to give up. I almost gave up. There were times where I cried and I was like, I don't think I can do this. I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't know if I'm good enough. There's that imposter syndrome that you get because you're comparing yourself to someone else, or you see these kids who've been nurtured since they were little and their parents have the money to put them through these programs. And here I am, this poor girl who has nothing, and I'm struggling to still pursue my dreams because I don't feel smart enough. I don't feel worthy enough. I didn't feel like, this was something I could actually obtain. And so I had to literally encourage myself. As the Bible says, encourage yourself. I had to encourage myself. And so there were many days I cried, and there were many days I struggled with Robert to try and get him to understand my world, which was very creative and in a sense, it's kind of similar to music, but still very different, because the things that we do as engineers, we are building products. We are designing everyday things that we use. I mean, think about your phone, an engineer designed that. And so when I think about all of the products that, we utilize today, I want it to be a part of something bigger than myself. And so he understood and he loved me for it. And he never tried to, take that away from me. He always encouraged me to do engineering because he knew that that was something that I loved. So I was grateful to have that support from him. Not so much as the world was very different because, I'm at work and I have a security clearance.
Yes.
So having a security clearance, for those of you that don't know, means that you have character, you have integrity, and that everything about your work is classified. It means you can't talk about it. So there's so much about my life that was like very hidden. And I'm living in a household with a man who has vowed to love me forever. And he can't know what I'm working on. The type of work that I'm doing and all the wonderful, amazing things that I'm building, the space shuttle. I can only tell just a little bit about what we did for the space shuttle. And there was so much that I did, so much I contributed to make it, the product that it was. But so your life is very different, and you're struggling to find this balance. And I think that's the problem. We're not taught that. No, my parents weren't married. I didn't have anybody to learn how to be a wife. How do you be a wife, and how do you be an engineering student, and how do you become an engineer and learn how to balance all of these things? I had nothing to go on. So I watched a lot of TV and I read a lot of books, and I prayed and asked God to really show me, what does it mean to separate and be a wife, and separate and have a career and have purpose? What does all this mean? So people always laugh at me. They go, "Oh, you go back to God." It's true, because that was my balance for myself. I didn't know how to be a wife. I had no clue. And there are so many things that I learned. And even though our marriage failed, and, there's so many things that I look back on and I go, wow, I've grown tremendously from having had known him and had him in my life, but I also grew as an engineer as well.
And I think that's very important to note. And the reason why I say that is when we look at successful people, I think we tend to forget they have real lives.
Right.
You were in a marriage, your marriage, you say it failed, but I beg to differ, which I think it was a time that God allowed you to have this wonderful person in your life, and you were wonderful to him for the time that God allowed and gave you. Because in life, we learn from everything we go through. Everything we live through is a wonderful experience. Sometimes we have to be very, very cautious of looking at it that way, because even in the church, we're good to say, oh, I'm blessed, I'm highly favored. Yeah, but I really still have real issues. I still have things that I have to deal with. And in dealing with those things, I can still give God glory. But if I can just be real here at this moment in those trying times, is what people began to watch. They began to watch to see if you are who you are. Had you not overcome those things, we wouldn't see this beautiful woman that we see today. Why? Because you had to overcome, you had to go through. I want to talk to the listener out there that is understanding that yes, you can be successful. Yes, you can go through these trials. But no, when you go through, there's a way to go through. I heard you say that I didn't know how to be a wife. Guess what? There's no manual. We have what the Bible says, but then we have real life. So in everybody's life, we can live a little differently, but yet we have the same foundation if we're married. But here's the thing. Through those trials, through those tribulations, we grow. So what I'm hearing you saying, those hard, difficult times, your character and your integrity, the same thing that you talked about with the security clearance,
Yes.
is who you are. Nobody can buy honor.
Right. It's true.
Nobody can buy intelligence or education. When God blesses you with those tools, you use it for the best that you can with mankind. I want to take a moment, my sister, to celebrate you for all that you've done. Sometimes we don't get that pat on the back to say you did a great job. I want you to know, growing up till now, you've done a great job. And I honor the work that you're doing. Like you said, it's very difficult to be in a relationship and can't always share what's going on. I honor you for having the integrity, the courage, the ability to be who you are and do the thing that you do that makes you who you are. There's not another thumbprint like yours, not one. And I'm sure Chicago is made proud. I'm sure they're made proud when they think about you. So I just wanted to take that time out to celebrate you right there, because I recognize, hearing your story, the racism, the sexism, the ability to want to go for bigger things and be told that you can't, but you never gave up.
No.
I want to encourage someone listening out there. Don't you dare give up on your dream. Don't give up on the abilities and gifts God has given you. Those gifts are going to yield you a harvest. And listen, we don't know how many lives, my sister, you touch just by not only on this particular JADASA Live, but let's talk about in your life, through everything you've been through. There are people that watch us, and they're watching you now. And they're going to take from your life all the great things you talked about in the trials and the tribulations that you made it through. And it's going to help them to be all that they are. So I just want to take that moment to congratulate you on all that you're doing, that God will bless you and continually keep his hand upon you and all of the great things you still yet have accomplished. You're getting ready to be Dr. So we're going to celebrate that early. How about that? We walk by faith and not by sight. So we're going to call you Dr. In advance, so that we believe you're going to be that doctor. Also, let's talk about, you had talked about the marriage. I read somewhere in this wonderful article about you, even in having children and health challenges and all of those things. Share with us about how you made it through all of that loss of a child, and still you're going strong and you give credit to God. Can you talk to us about those hard places and what happened and what you must do to go through what you're going through to be all that you are?
So I actually had, I had 3 miscarriages, and then I had 5 births. And so, and then I lost my son, but it was very, so for me, looking at it, like, being a mom was like, when I found out I was pregnant, it was a beautiful thing, but it was learning that my child was sick and had congenital heart disease and all of these things going on, it was like, whoa, like, you're excited. And then you learn that you may not be the mother that you thought you would be. Maybe your child's not going to make it. And so for me, that was very, very heartbreaking. And it took me years to really be able to talk about it. But looking back, I'm still not a mom, because after that, I was so heartbroken and I was just like, I don't want to try this again. So it sort of stunted my growth in a little bit, just because I didn't want to be hurt again. I didn't want to have to endure that a fourth time. And so I just accepted that maybe that's not God's will for my life. And maybe, that he will bless me with, in the future to marry someone that does have children, so I just tried to look at it from a positive perspective. But right after I lost my son, so I went back to work and engineering, and I got sick with lupus. And so I was like, losing my memory, and I couldn't remember. I had a photographic memory and I couldn't remember anything anymore. I would walk out of meetings very confused, like, what just happened? What did we just talk about? And that confused, I know they said something about this meeting. What happened? And I couldn't remember. And I had an intern that worked under me who alerted me that he saw some changes in me. And so it was sort of a very rapid decline. I got sick very, very quickly, and my memory was the first thing to go. And I went to the first set of doctors, and they were like, oh, there's nothing wrong. It's just stress. But me knowing my body, I was like, something else is wrong. I know, I hear you, but I need a doctor that's really gonna do the necessary work to find out what's wrong. So I went to a different set of doctors. And so I had a whole team, cardiologists, rheumatologists, everybody, there was like 10 people on my team. And we're trying to figure out, why is Felanice declining? Lo and behold, lupus affected my brain in such a way that it caused me to lose my memory. And so they said, oh, you'll never work again. We did a test for the brain, and my memory was operating at 9% capacity. So to go from photographic to 9%, I was devastated. And so to hear the words, you'll never work again, I was very troubled by that word itself. And I was troubled at the fact of how Black people get diagnosed. I was troubled at the fact that, they were very quick to just give me some other diagnosis, but it was me advocating for myself, saying, no, this doesn't sound right. I've been in my body for these number of years. Something's wrong. And so I had to keep pushing for that. And to the point that my doctor said, look, you can't go back to work until we figure out how to heal you. And maybe you'll never work again. Well, I've never been a never person. So I was like, I'm going back to work. I don't know how, but I'm going back to work. And so I did stay off of work for 7 years. And so people were like, oh my God, you're so sick. You have these I would have flare-ups every single day. I would have headaches every day. And it was just very difficult. A lot of companies don't recognize disability. They don't understand it. And it was challenging for me. So I went on this quest because I love to fix things, I want to fix myself. And I was like, okay, how do we fix this so that I can get to a place where now I understand lupus, I understand disability, and I understand what that means. What does it look like for a patient to go back to work? And so the law office that handled my case was Cantor & Cantor in Los Angeles. And I am the first person in that law firm to ever go back to work.
Whoa.
The very first person. And the level, it was first of all, if you have to go to a disability case, it is awful. And the stress that brings to you is even worse than you feeling sick. And so I went through 4 years of that. 4 years of fighting for an ability to have something that was given to me for work. I'm supposed to have a long-term disability policy. You're supposed to pay for me to be off work if I can't work as a software engineer. And they didn't want to. And so there was this big fight about it. And I remember finding a case that it was in Los Angeles. The lady had won her case, but she had the same exact symptoms as me. Wow. And so I used that case to help us win. And so I kind of wish I would have been an attorney too, but that's a whole nother other topic. And so going back, so me literally like winning my case, I won my case in 1 hour. It was the most egregious case that the judge had ever seen. And all of these people that I meet along the way, all these patients, I started to inspire them along the way. I started to encourage them, you know, that they could go back to work. And so, which propelled my PhD. I am now working in machine learning, and I'm working in artificial intelligence. And my goal is to find a cure for how patients are diagnosed. And hopefully that will help the lupus patients to get a diagnosis early. And I want to filter out the noise. There's all this bias, you know, you're a Black female, you know, you come from the projects. There's all these things that get introduced into your diagnosis that also filter the way the doctor sees you. And it filters how much care they actually give you. So my research, my PhD research will help Black patients to get a proper diagnosis. So I feel like God has, you know, had me go through that for a reason. But in trying to go back to work,
yes.
And I remember 2015, I said, I'm going back to work. And people looked at me. Like, the doctor said you'll never work again. I said, yeah, I know, but I think I want to work for Microsoft. And everybody's like, what? Like, you haven't even applied. And so I started looking up Microsoft's disability, how they view disability, how they interact with, you know, their employees in regards to a disability. So I started to just put together a plan. I put together an entire research plan for myself, how to get back to work. And I went back to school. I started reading every day. I started really pushing my brain to retain information, and I couldn't just give up. And so in that process, I started talking to all these patients, and I would help them, you know, with their homework and, you know, anything that they needed. And I started to give back. And I said, God, I'll give of myself if you will bless me in this way. And I want to go back to work. And so 2017, I was at a conference. Robert had just died. I was actually I interviewed with Microsoft the exact same day that Robert died. And so I got the call that he passed, and I was hurt. I was sad. I had a whole bunch of emotions, and I'm like, and I have to interview in like 4 hours. So God gave me everything that I needed, and I had 13 job offers, Pastor Michelle.
Wow.
And I chose from Google to, I mean, just various big name companies. And I chose Microsoft. And people go, why did you choose Microsoft? I chose them because of their views on disability and their accommodations. I have a very flexible schedule and all of these things that were beautiful. And so when I speak now, I speak from a standpoint of not only am I a Black female, but I'm also a Black female that has a disability. And this is my life, but it's not the end of my life. And so I want people to feel like they can still go back to work. I have a very great salary at Microsoft, and I want people to feel like you can still have a life. You can work on amazing products, and the products that I work on are intelligent, and they're helping people with disabilities. And so I'm so grateful to look back and see the transition of where I've come from to, you know, never giving up. Even those 7 years that I was off, I learned something. I was able to reflect on my life, and I was able to, you know, put myself to a point where I could go back to work, and I could go back successfully. And so that's kind of what I feel like my quest is now, is in this PhD, is to, you know, find a cure. And hopefully that cure will filter over to diabetes and all sorts of other illnesses that Black people get, so that we can not feel like, oh my God, this is the end. You know, I have this diagnosis. What does it mean? Well, does it mean it is the end, or does it mean that maybe it's the beginning of something beautiful? And so that's sort of the next phase of my life, and where I am right now, is hoping that I can encourage people to go back to work. So
I really believe you'll do that, and you're already doing a great job of that. Just listening to your story and all of the obstacles, all of the things that set in your way, there wasn't a setback that derailed your dream. And that's very important for someone out there listening. JADASA is about surviving, overcoming, and being all that you can be, is what Cynthia Bennett exemplifies with this wonderful organization, and women such as yourself, even Valencia. I want you to know this work that you're doing is so vital. You talked about diseases, disabilities. I myself have been through various health issues. I still struggle with some things, but I have never let what I struggle with ever derail me from my dream. My dream is to serve God's people, to use my intelligence and the gifts that He's given me to make this world a better place. And I believe that's exactly what you're doing with your life every day. You have a wonderful story, a gift that God has given you to give to this world. And we're excited you're in this world to give it to us. I wish you nothing but the best for your PhD, all that you're going to do. I do want to say this: when you talked about the health, I'm so glad you brought that in. You talked about your emotions, you talked about how you felt, and yet you had this great interview. How many of us would just stop and just give up right at that moment because life is knocking at the door and we just can't seem to answer it at that time? When we are able to find that strength deep within and press forward, look at the outcome that comes out of it. I'm a firm believer that what's stormy and dark, there's a light waiting if we allow the light to come through. But here's the thing: if you want something great, it's going to cost you something.
It
You
does.
found in your career, from growing up, in your marriage, losing your child, all the various things you had to go through. But here's the thing: I am a firm believer of this. God would never allow us to go through something without rewarding us like Job. Job went through. Job lost everything. But in the end, God said that I just can't let my servant go through that and not reward him. Not reward him with that doctorate degree. Not reward them with life that they desire, because they're faithful not only in serving me, but wanting to succeed and wanting to get better at whatever they do. These are the keys that help us to be all that we need to be in life, and keeping a good balance. And here's the thing: we're not always going to get it right. We're not going to have every day be Sunday. So on those days when it's dark, on those days when it seems like you can't make it, I want you to remember our sister, our queen here, if you will, who pressed through every obstacle to become all that she is. And not only did she do it, she did it with success. She did it with faith. She did it with persistence. She did it being an overcomer. What our sister has, you have as well. It takes us looking within ourselves, understanding we're all born with a gift and a purpose. And you have to continue to work towards that so God can get the glory out of your life. What an awesome story you have. What an awesome life.
Yeah.
I will definitely continue to pray with you, and pray for you rather. And my sister Cynthia, I just adore her. I love the woman that she is, all that she is to so many. I'm so grateful for this opportunity and space that you would even think of me, for me to sit in on your behalf. We're very honored to do that. Very honored, my sister, to have you on. And before we close out, would you just leave the listening audience? I know you've talked about your degree that you're going to do. You talked about growing up as a woman, overcoming obstacles, the grandmother and the family unit, that you weren't raised by your biological parents, but yet God blessed you with a wonderful story and to be able to become who you are. Would you encourage them and let them know, as a listener, that what you've been able to overcome and do, they can do it too, when the way that God puts it on your heart, so someone will know they're an overcomer like you?
So, what I would leave you guys with is to be intentional. I think that throughout my entire life, when I think about the things that I've overcome, I was intentional. I think that we can often get, strayed away, from circumstances by looking at what's presented before us, and we don't necessarily see beyond that pain. And so everything that I've done, I have been intentional. I was intentional about my degrees. I was intentional about going back to school. I was intentional about going back to work. And, I think that it's that having that intention, it gives you a strength that I can do this. I will do this. And so even as I look at engineering now, and even as I look at, all the things that I accomplished at Microsoft and how grateful I am to be back to work, I am still intentional about my career. My doctorate is not for me. It's for everyone, for all of you listening. It's for my family. It's for all of those little girls and those that look just like me that want to go back to school or wonder if they could get a degree. It is for all of you. I get my degree. Of course, it helps me, but it's really not about me. And so the intention that I have about what type of degree that I'm getting, what type of career I want going forward, is to be able to go back and reach back, to help those along the way to know that, hey, you can do it. It may cost you something. It cost me time. It cost me, going out with my friends a lot. It cost me having a lot of children. It did cost me something, but I think that what I gained was so much greater than what I lost. And so what I would say to you is be intentional. Be intentional about where you want to go. Be intentional about what kind of career you want. Think about those things. Think about your purpose in life. That I heard one time, Dr. Miles Monroe, who was one of my favorites back in the day, he made a comment, and the comment was, your purpose is tied to a problem.
Yes.
So solve a problem. What problem in this world do you want to solve? And you will have many along the way. And when you think about your life from that perspective, and about your career from that perspective, it will change over time because you will solve that problem and you will go on to a next. But this world is full of problems. Solve a problem. Engineering is all about solving problems. That's what we do. And so the intention of my degree is to solve problems. What problem do you want to solve? How do you want to solve it? And figure out how to get to or get the information or everything that you need to solve that problem. That's what I would want to leave with everyone, is be intentional. And what problem are you solving?
Awesome. And listen, that's great information to take with us. This has been an awesome live for JADASA Live. And for more information, you can get information on our sister Felanice Yancy. Would you give them your information if they'd like to contact you, or they would have some information that they would like to follow up? Maybe there's someone listening that wants some information about engineering. Would you be so kind to leave us with your information that they can contact you?
Sure. I am on LinkedIn as Felanice Yancy. I'm also on Twitter as STEM Engineer Girl. And yeah, those are two. And my email, you can email me at flute, LXXI, V as in Victor, @gmail.com. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have, or if there's something that you don't want to necessarily type in a chat right now, I'd be more than happy to talk to you offline. So thank you so much.
Oh, we thank Cynthia for inviting you, and thank you for being with us on this evening. Well, listen, this has been an awesome podcast. My name is Pastor Michelle Y. Wright. I'm also a podcast host for Just For You on Elation Radio. You can also find me on YouTube, Facebook, Michelle with one L, Michele, last name Wright. On LinkedIn, Michelle Wright, the same name. And you can also see me on Instagram as His Blessed Girl 7. I want you to know, please stay in touch with JADASA, JADASA.org. JADASA.org and find out more information about how you or a friend or someone you know may be able to benefit from the tools that they offer for women going through domestic violence. But not only women, we don't want to stereotype. We're talking about individuals and families who need these tools and services to better their lives and to be all that they're called to be. Again, I want to thank you, my sister Cynthia Bennett, for inviting me on to co-host. I want to thank you again, our dear sister and queen, that is Felanice Yancy. I am just honored that we had this time together. And please, by all means, remember this year is not a year that you will give up. This is a year that you will push forward. You will not allow your setbacks to derail your dreams. Begin with the faith and the belief that you can do it, and know through your trials you will overcome. And keep yourself positive. Stay around positive people. And remember, God is able to do anything but fail. Thank you again for joining us today on JADASA Live. And we'll look forward to seeing you again as the Lord would allow. God bless you. And thank you again, Felanice, for being
You
with
for
us on today.
having me.
All right. God bless.